Moonletter, Astrological Podcast.
Neptune and Drugs, From Anesthetics to Cosmic Consciousness, by Ben Belinsky. Neptune was discovered 23rd of September 1846, around the time of the invention of photography and the discovery of anesthetics. Here we explore what links them to create the big picture of the subtle yet powerful astrological influence of the planet Neptune. Can you imagine the world before anesthetics? If the operation didn't kill you, then the sheer physical shock would. Makes you glad for medical advances, doesn't it? I mean, whatever they say about the benefits of natural remedies, if you need to cut me open, then please put me under first. Astrologically, anesthetics are associated with Neptune, and it should come as no surprise to hear that the year of Neptune's discovery, 1846, was also the year of the first use of anesthetics in surgery. Here are some of the pioneers. New England dentist William T.G. Morton used ether for a painless tooth extraction on 30th of September 1846. That's just 7 days after the discovery of Neptune. 2 months later, British surgeon Robert Liston carried out the first public operation using modern anaesthesia in Europe, ether, at University College London Hospital on 21st of December 1846. The following January, Scottish obstetrician James Young Simpson used ether for relief of labour pains, and later that year he substituted chloroform for ether and published his classic account of a new anaesthetic agent. Simpson persisted in the use of chloroform for relief of labour pains against opposition from obstetricians and the clergy. So successful was the use of chloroform as an anaesthetic in childbirth that in April 1853 Queen Victoria asked anaesthetist John Snow to administer the drug during the delivery of her 8th child, Leopold. He then repeated the procedure for the delivery of her daughter, Beatrice, in 1857. This led to wider acceptance of obstetrical anaesthesia. But this is not the only effect of Neptune, merely the lowest vibration. To wipe yourself out with alcohol or opioids because the pain of life is too great, while the highest level is the access to universal consciousness. So how do we get from the lowest to the highest? In his 1968 book, The Politics of Ecstasy, Timothy Leary writes about his experiences with various drugs. He creates a 7-level scale of drugs and their associated states of consciousness, from the sedatives, anesthetics, and painkillers, through stimulants such as caffeine and amphetamine, the recreationals such as hashish and MDMA, also known as ecstasy, and at the top the psychedelics such as LSD, psilocybin, and mescaline. But Leary's focus on the drugs in relation to consciousness means he misses what I feel is the essential quality of drugs, namely their ability to relieve pain. To look again at the lowest level, anesthetics are used to deal with the physical pain of giving birth, of surgical interventions, of dental treatment, of migraines. Historically, alcohol, chloroform, and ether have given way to opioids and other modern anesthetics. These are all addictive. In fact, as pointed out by author William Burroughs, the more it kills pain, the more addictive it is. Burroughs also relates the use of drugs in dealing with the next level of pain and its treatments, namely, the pain of damage to our image. He sees drugs as a way of replacing our damaged self-image with something that makes us feel better about ourselves. At the physical level, this can be as a result of accident or disability. Here's a quote from William Burroughs in his book Nova Express. "When a patient loses a leg, What has been damaged? Obviously, his image of himself. Likewise, the damage and disfigurement resulting from severe burns or acid attack. As well as physical mutilation, the damage to one's self-image can come from, for example, emotional abuse. For anyone, child or adult, to be told over and over, "You're worthless, you'll never amount to anything, you've ruined my life, you're as bad as your father, I wish I'd had an abortion rather than giving birth to you," is devastating to the self-esteem and will often create a sense of self-loathing. Likewise, the consequences of rape or sexual abuse. The pain one is left with isn't a physical pain, it's a pain to one's image of oneself. Alcohol can deal with this pain, albeit temporarily. It can also silence the abusive voices, silence the imagined voices of what others think of us. At a more everyday level, it can give us confidence, give us an illusory sense of our attractiveness, of our abilities, for example, our ability to speak a foreign language, or our ability to drive. Taking this to its logical extreme, Burroughs equates junk, opioids and other painkillers, with image. He talks about image addiction. For Burroughs, images kill pain just as medication does, and in that way they are as addictive as opiates. Here's another quote from Nova Express. "What is pain? Obviously damage to the image. Junk is concentrated image, and this accounts for its pain-killing action. Nor could there be any pain if there was no image." Feeling bad about yourself? Go out and buy some makeup, a new dress, a new techno gadget. Go see a movie, download an album. Go to Paris and take a photo of yourself in front of the Eiffel Tower. Go to India and get a selfie outside the Taj Mahal. Go to Egypt and take a photo in front of the pyramids. Any internationally recognized monument will do, and your identity is validated, your image is strengthened. There's a scene in Jean-Luc Godard's 1963 film Les Carabiniers, when the two dumb heroes are recruited to fight as soldiers in a war with a promise of great treasure as a reward. But when they return, all they can produce is postcards of the splendours and popular tourist destinations of the world. The renowned author and critic Susan Sontag noted in her 1977 collection of essays on photography that Godard's gag vividly parodies the equivocal magic of the photographic image. And this has become something everyday and totally normal now. Rather than enjoying a view, we take a selfie and share the image with our thousands of friends. Rather than listening to the music at a gig, we are more concerned with recording it and posting it online. Rather than enjoying the food in a restaurant, we have to photograph and share images of the food that has to be presented in such a way as to be photogenic. Likewise, pornography substitutes the power of the image for the real thing. The images trigger associations, memories of pleasure, fantasies accompanied by self-stimulation until we reach what Burroughs calls some kind of awful climax, and we are conditioned by the climax to associate the pleasure with the pornographic image. Then instead of our own imagination and memories, we become dependent on the photographs or the movies to turn us on. And we constantly need new material as the old material loses its kick, just as a junkie builds up a tolerance to the junk and needs more and more to get the hit. Actual sex can then become a poor substitute for the perfection of the pornographic image. In this way, solo masturbation becomes completely separated from the sexual act. It's not only something to do to relieve sexual pressure, it's something to do for comfort, something to do when you're bored or depressed, something to help you get to sleep, or just to pass the time. Something that's easier than the complicated business of relating to another human being. In addition, for some people, the associations of sexual imagery can focus on one particular aspect of the partner's body. Hence, we have a metonymy, or a fetish, where the part comes to stand for the whole. The breast or buttocks stand for the whole woman. The muscles, penis, or body hair stand for the whole man. Nothing wrong with that if it helps to enhance the sex. But when we depend on the fetish in order to get off, the image has not only separated us from the real experience, but taken over completely from the experience with the actual sexual partner. The extent that Neptunian images have taken over from reality is also noted by Guy Debord in his 1967 book, The Society of the Spectacle. This may have seemed far-fetched at the time, but now can be seen as prescient when we look at the world through the homemade distorting lens of Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, YouTube. Here's some quotes from The Society of the Spectacle by Guy Debord. The spectacle is not a collection of images, but a social relation among people, mediated by images. The term spectacle refers to a society where images not only dominate, but replace real experiences. It creates a superficial reality focused on appearances, designed primarily to distract people from reality. This ultimately disconnects them from themselves and from those around them. Another way of looking at this from Jim Morrison's 1969 poem sequence, The Lords. Quote, "We are content with the given in sensation's quest. We have been metamorphosed from a mad body dancing on hillsides to a pair of eyes staring in the dark." Images enable us to see ourselves as whole, when in fact we are fragmented and in pain. The images that we consume, that are created by corporations and their agencies, that are designed to sell us stuff, to give us the fake identities that give us a false sense of being an individual. We buy these images as accessories to enable us to project ourselves by the way we dress, the way we speak, what we eat, and how we move. But these images are merely sticking plasters that don't actually deal with the pain or with the situation that has caused it. And if you don't keep up with the latest fashion... And now, with the aid of cosmetic surgery, we can remodel reality to become the image. If our reality doesn't match our image of ourselves, we suffer. So we alter our bodies to match the image of attractiveness that we have taken on from the spectacle. Are you slim enough? Muscular enough? Are your lips thick enough? Are your boobs big enough? Is your butt pert enough? In some cases, dissatisfaction with one's body image can become obsessive, even pathological. This may or may not be related to an eating disorder. For example, people suffering from anorexia nervosa who perceive, that is to say, have an image of their body as fat, despite the fact that they are verging on the skeletal. Or there's the muscle dysmorphia that some bodybuilders suffer from in their pursuit of masculine perfection. These body dysmorphic disorders can lead to seeing oneself as unattractive or even downright ugly. How often do you check your appearance? Does your appearance lead you to avoid social situations? Does your appearance cause you distress? Is an adverse Neptune aspect a factor in these conditions? Then beyond that are the genuine experiences of personal pain. The pain of divorce, bereavement, or betrayal. The experience of crushing debt, of homelessness or destitution. And here we encounter the other side of Neptune, compassion. Through experiencing the tragedies of life, we learn compassion for those going through similar circumstances. In a way, it doesn't matter how you get through these experiences. The point is to get through them somehow. As John Lennon writes, whatever gets you through the night is all right. In the end, these experiences are central to our lives. They can be turning points. Through compassion and empathy, we put ourselves in the position of the one who is suffering. It's something we feel physically. We flinch when we see someone taking a blow. We suffer with them. When we feel the other's pain as our own pain, we learn compassion. Some people have to experience suffering in order to learn compassion. Maybe you don't feel it till you've lived it yourself and learn what it means. The difficulty of someone bringing up a child alone, the problems of a blind person navigating a busy city street, the way old age or reduced mobility requires someone to slow down, the problems caused by a temporary or permanent disability, wondering where your next meal is going to come from. Then there's the compassion from one living being to another. What do you feel for an abandoned puppy, a fox stuck in a trap, a bird with a broken wing and unable to fly, an elephant mother with a stillborn calf? Neptune's compassion abolishes the boundary between us and other living beings. We identify with the suffering of the other. We feel it physically, emotionally, or energetically. It's different from pity, which according to the Buddhist tradition is the desire to end suffering because it makes us feel uncomfortable, whereas true compassion, or karuna, is the desire to end the suffering of all beings. But there are those of us who choose not to feel. We turn a blind eye. We cross the street. We drive on past. The other's suffering does more than make us feel uncomfortable. It disturbs us. Their suffering reminds us of our own fragility, mortality, and vulnerability, something we would rather forget, because fragility, mortality, and vulnerability mean powerlessness, and power is maybe the most addictive drug there is. If I feel upset by the sight of someone with only one leg, or someone in a wheelchair, or a homeless person whose bed is a cardboard box in the street, how do I deal with it? Am I moved to offer help in some way, either directly or indirectly, or do I separate myself from the situation, withdraw into my addiction, thereby numbing what I feel? They brought it on themselves. They are just peasants, animals, vermin, losers. It's the will of God. Power is maybe the most addictive drug there is. For those hooked on it, even the mere thought of losing it is unbearable. History is full of dictators who could not accept the will of the people, the democratic decision that required they relinquish power. This is a pattern the world has lived with for millennia, and still it continues. These are the folk who will spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on freezing their bodies when they die, in the hope that one day the technology will exist to bring them back to life. Such is the inability to let go of power and wealth and accept the release of physical death. But the next step is maybe the hardest. How far does our compassion go? Sure, it extends to the victim, the one who suffers the blows. But does it extend as far as the murderer, the torturer, the rapist, the sexual abuser of children? How is it possible to find compassion for the perpetrators of these atrocities? Here we have to make the distinction between the individual and their greater self, also known as the higher self or oversoul. What is the murderer or the torturer doing to their greater self, the self that continues from life to life, taking on different forms, different identities, but carrying with it the complex of spiritual assets and liabilities known as karma? And when we take into account the karma that we create and carry from life to life, and the time and work required to clear that karma, by committing such atrocities, the perpetrators are clearly damaging themselves. They are creating suffering for themselves in the longer term, and in this way they are deserving of our compassion. For Christians, the perpetrator's soul must be saved, as must all souls, and that salvation can only come from the intercession of Christ. Similarly, for Buddhists, the Bodhisattva ideal asks us to provide relief to all suffering beings throughout all time and space, leading eventually to their enlightenment. So, for us to be able to find compassion for the perpetrators of these atrocities, one must have achieved the awareness of what the perpetrators' actions have done to their soul, what karmic consequences they will have to suffer, and how long it will take, and how difficult it will be to clear the consequences of their actions. In the 1995 film Dead Man Walking, spoiler alert, a Christian nun has to find within herself compassion for a prisoner on death row who has been charged with and found guilty of the rape and murder of a couple of teenagers, but who still cannot admit what he has done. She has to work through her initial revulsion to his crimes, but eventually, through her compassion for him, he is able to admit what he has done and to ask for forgiveness. Christ's words on the cross, "Forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do," Luke chapter 23, verse 34, are a clear statement of his compassion for those who tortured and murdered him. Likewise from the Proverbs of Hell by William Blake, "The cut worm forgives the plough." The boundlessness of the higher vibration of Neptune leads us from compassion for others based on our own experience of suffering, to compassion for the suffering of humanity, to compassion for all living things, to the consciousness of the oneness of creation. This consciousness has been reported by those who have attained mystical states. Some have achieved these states through spiritual practice, such as prayer, meditation, or fasting. Others through the use of entheogenic drugs, such as ayahuasca, peyote, or psilocybin. These are states that our language struggles to describe, as they take us way outside our everyday world of physical survival. But these states are none the less real for being beyond the limits of our language to express. Leary describes these states as the atomic electronic level of consciousness. Others have described perceiving the world as pure vibration or universal love. And the language we use depends on the tradition one comes from. People will speak of universal consciousness, Christ consciousness, or samadhi. We are not, of course, advocating the use of any of these drugs, as they may be outside your local laws. For me, William Burroughs' advice says it. Learn to make it without any chemical corn.
And for more astrological and spiritual musings, check out moonletter.co.uk.